So a little bit about Steve's background. Most of you know him, but Steve has experience as a classroom teacher, as a building administrator, as a state administrator, being the assistant superintendent of public instruction under Denise Juneau. And then Steve's most recent position, as I said, was as an ambassador for the Ed Ready program, which again, Steve was just that, a great ambassador. He's always been an ambassador for education. He's a delightful storyteller, and I know there will be a plethora of stories today. That's how he operates, and but we all know that sometimes when you have that difficulty getting your students' attention in class, you'd say, I have a story for you, and it would snap to attention, and all of a sudden the engagement went up. And so I think that great teachers, great educators, great public speakers are all great storytellers, and Steve's one of those. He's going to talk to us about his variety of experiences. One of the things that he will address today is the 3 R's, and he has a different take on the 3 R's that some of us might think about as far as reading, writing, arithmetic. I first got to work with Steve, and he ignited my enthusiasm for student voice a number of years ago, and I know that's going to be a big part of his presentation. And a follow-up to what Tim Lewis talked about last week about the framework for MTSS and the importance of those setting expectations and the different things that are so important in education, have always been, and never more important now than in this era of a worldwide pandemic. So Steve, I could talk about you for a long time. But
how about for another 55 minutes and we'll be done?
I'm not going to quite go that long. I don't know if Keith Hoyer's on, if Keith wants to say a word or two or not. Are you there, Keith?
Yeah, I'm good, Joe. You pretty much summed it up. We'll get rolling.
Then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. York. So without further ado, Steve, you're on, my man.
Howdy. Thanks for being here. First thing I'm going to do is actually stop my video just so I save some bandwidth here at home so that I don't blip out on you. Occasionally my internet does say that the connection is unstable and it blips me for 3 or 4 seconds, so just be patient with that when it happens. And what I have decided is it makes me unstable when it's unstable. So I've learned to live with it. So our topic today is teacher to student inspirational support for aspirational efforts. First of all, I love this cartoon. It's one of my favorites. I want to say thanks to all of you for taking the time to join us today and look at this. I am proud of the work you've done. I can't imagine what it's like to be trying to maintain all of the appropriate classroom approaches and all the things you do well in this COVID era, where we have kids that are not under wing all the time or they're separated. It just has to be tremendously stressful. And I'm proud to be your colleague. I will definitely hold that thought as we talk today. I believe there is a chat button. So if you have a question, you might shoot a question onto the chat and Joe and Keith might be able to answer that or interrupt me and bring it up so that we can answer your question if you happen to have one. So today's goal is pretty clear. Challenge your practice to inspire your students to develop and succeed at accomplishing aspirational goals. You're the inspirer, and they are the ones aspiring to develop the goals. We're going to use the Quality Institute of Student Aspirations definition of what aspirations mean. They're simply the ability to dream and set goals for the future while being inspired in the present to reach those dreams. And now let's look at those 3 R's that Joe was talking about. The first 2 are rigor and relevance. And actually, this came out, 15, 20 years ago. The author was talking about schools need to have rigor. No doubt about that. We've got to be able to challenge our students to gain the knowledge they need to be successful. And I would take that a step further. They need to be able to gain the knowledge of how to learn so that they can adapt to the changing times. And relevance, well, you know about relevance. This generation has the world of knowledge at their fingertips. So they often ask the question, why do I need to know this? I can Google it. So if any of you are librarians, you have the most important job in the world. Don't let them say that you're obsolete because now it's all tech. No, one of our biggest problems in our country is the fact that our kids can't discern what is accurate information, what is information that should be trusted, and then apply that. You can find almost anything on the internet, but we have to know how to be able to look at it and reasonably sort out what doesn't belong and what isn't correct. Now, I'll say that rigor and relevance are important. In fact, one little story to go with us on relevance. Now, I'm old enough to tell you about what relevance was for me when I was a school student. I grew up in St. Ignatius, Montana, which is just south of where I am right now in the Mission Valley. And until I was a junior in high school, we had one television channel, no cable TV. There was a movie house that showed movies a few nights a week. Occasionally, they'd bring a film into the school and we would see something. We had a community library. So, had no internet. In fact, I was on a party line with the telephone, so there were 3 other families that shared the line with us. And I became a big AFL football fan because it's the only thing we got to see. The NFL was on a channel we didn't get. So when we wanted to find out about the world, we went to school. Teachers told us about these things. They shared experiences they've had in traveling, and we soaked it up. Well, my grandkids, who are now all in school, had that information, more information than I had as a high school student at their fingertips when they were 5 years old. So relevance has changed greatly. Kids need to know why they need to learn this. I'm going to tell you, though, that the 3rd R is the one that holds the other 2 up, and that is relationships. You know, when I was just becoming a teacher, in fact, this was the summer of 1977. My dad was a teacher and pretty well decorated for it. He was known as a really good teacher. I kind of walked out into our backyard where he was working, and I as a smart aleck kid would, I said, "Hey, old timer, tell me what I need to do to be successful in this endeavor." And he looked at me and he said this: "You need to care about these kids. You need to care enough about them that you expect their best every day, and your care needs to be genuine." Well, that was 44 years ago, and it became the center of my educational philosophy and my existence as an educator, as a teacher, as a principal, as a state assistant superintendent. So I'm going to stop right here. Oh, no, not yet. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I want you to think for a second, and I know we can't share, but think about a meaningful experience in your educational journey that influenced how you felt about school or even yourself. Because what I'm going to propose here is that students don't remember what they were taught. They remember how they were taught. Was it positive or negative? On the positive side, my wife tells a story of the fact that she was not a very good middle school history student in the fine town of Shelby, Montana. And they were working on a big project, and the teacher came by and said to her, "You are the hardest working student in this class. You put more effort into these projects than anybody does. I really appreciate that. I'm basically proud of you for doing it." Well, her C went to an A because she was enthused to get this done and get it going. And that was a positive experience for her. On the negative side, I was a thriving baritone player, actually not. I wasn't very good with the baritone. I was in 6th grade, my second year band. We were in the spring concert right before the end of the year. We were in the middle of a concert, and I was in the wrong tempo. I was moving too fast for the song. And the music teacher, the conductor, stopped the song, came over to me, and cussed me out in front of a gym full of people. And that affected my baritone playing quite a bit because I never touched the baritone again. In fact, I never touched an instrument again. Had a powerful negative effect. So we can be positive, we can be negative. So this quote I love: every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story. This is a quote from Josh Shipp. I suggest you Google Josh. He was left at an Oklahoma hospital after birth by his 17-year-old mother who he never saw again, and proceeded to be in 12 foster care situations or homes in his first 14 years of life. And he got to the point where it was a contest to see if he could get kicked out. Finally, he landed in a foster care situation where this gentleman named Rodney took him under wing and was consistent and cared for him unconditionally, stood by him, and actually turned him around. And he's one of the most successful motivational speakers in the country today. His message is just that: every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story. And oftentimes, that caring adult can be an educator. So we talked about that one. I'm going the wrong way again. Sorry, guys. I've been away from Ed Ready so long I can't remember how to operate a computer. There we go. That's what. So I ran across this article, 12 Things Students Remember Most About Good Teachers by Saga Briggs on Inform Ed. It was interesting. This Canadian educator, Lori Gard is her name, shared some personal experiences about good teaching. And I normally don't put this much text into a PowerPoint, but I really, really wanted you to be able to have this PowerPoint when we were finished so you could have the quote. But Ms. Gard writes, at the end of the day, most students won't remember what amazing lesson plans you've created. They won't remember how organized your bulletin boards are, how straight and neat are the desk rows, but they will remember you, your kindness, your empathy, your care and concern. They'll remember that you took the time to listen, to stop to ask them how they were, how they really were, in a genuine sense. I'm going to jump out of here for a second because I want to share a clip with you about another gentleman. And this is Craig Bills. And Craig is a chemistry teacher in Billings, Montana. He was Montana Teacher of the Year in about 2014. I think I was on the committee that.
Greeting. How are you today?
And Craig has an amazing experience to share. And so this is about 9 minutes. Well, we'll watch this. Please let me know if you're hearing it.
When asked, how are you today? They say good, and it turns out that most of them are lying. I know because I've got the data to prove it. But it's this little lie where we tell each other we're good when we're not that's taken me on an interesting journey into the human mind, and it's taught me something incredibly important. It's taught me compassion. You might be thinking, how can a lie teach anyone about, how can a lie teach anyone about compassion? Well, I'm a high school science teacher, so I watch people interact with each other all day, every day. And I constantly hear the greeting, how are you today? I don't know that anybody really listens to the answer, but I began to, and I noticed that everybody always says good, just like most of you did. I figured there's no way that all of us are good all of the time, especially my students, because high school can be tough. So I came up with a plan. It seems that everybody's so willing to broadcast their emotions on social media these days. I wondered if my students would tell the truth if a computer asked them that question. So I got a hold of my cousin, Justin, a computer programmer here in Bozeman, and asked him if he'd be willing to write an iPad app that would allow me to ask my students this question, and hopefully they would tell the truth. Now, this is obviously a fictitious class, but when students enter my room, they walk up to the iPad, and let's see, we'll be Albert today. They click on their name, and then they show me, hopefully, what their mood is. So they can move this back and forth, and I think Albert would be thrilled to be here today. So he'll be at 100. They go and sit down, and the next student comes up as they enter class. This actually takes very little time. And as they're coming into the class, on my computer in real time, this is what I see. I see the students who have checked in. I see the mood that they chose for the day. And then I can see the average mood of the class and then historical over time. This gives me a really, really interesting picture into how the class is feeling that day. So I envisioned I should be able to take this data. When I first came up with this plan, I should be able to take the data, and then I should be able to compare that data with things like the temperature or the humidity or maybe moon phases. And then I'd be able to trick my students because I'd be able to manipulate my classroom. So when they come walking in, they just stop and say, I don't know what it is about this room. I could just sit in here and learn chemistry all day. But what I failed to realize was how the app and the journey it would take me on into the teenage brain would forever change my life. And it would teach me what it means to be human. I knew I was in trouble the first day I turned on the app. I was excited. Students were coming in. I was having them sign in. They were figuring it out. One young girl, she passed by and I grabbed her and said, hey, how you doing today? And she said, I'm a 3. And I said, a 3? That seems awfully low. And she started to cry. And there were tears coming down her face, and she started to tell me about some things that were going on in her life. And she stood there like pouring her heart out to me, and all I could think was, what have I done? I'm not trained for this. The very next class period, I got four guys come into class, 4 football players. They run up the iPad, they're like, oh, we can put in a number. First one says, I'm a 97. Next one says, I'm 100. Next one, I'm 100. Fourth one, he didn't say anything. He went and sat down. But after what happened in first period, I figured I could use something positive. So I grabbed the first 3 guys. I'm like, guys, sounds like we're in a good mood. What's going on? Said, big game tonight. You're going to be there, aren't you? I'm like, yeah. And I made my way over to the 4th one. And I said, hey, big game tonight. How you doing? He said, I'm a 47. I suck at football. I'm not going to get to play anyway. I just wish this season would be over. I'm thinking, in only 2 class periods, I have just experienced every known human emotion with my students. And remember, this isn't what was supposed to happen. I was supposed to make sense of the world, not clouding my own understanding of it. So after I got a pretty good stream of data here, I figured, well, what does anybody do when they get a whole bunch of data? They make a graph. So I made a graph. The math teachers were proud. And then I figured, well, maybe I can make sense of what's going on by the temperature. I mean, we've dealt with a lot of that this year. It's been cold this year, and this was a couple years ago, and I ran some statistics, and I didn't find anything I really thought was going to change the world. And I said, well, what about humidity? Because I could put some humidifiers in my room, or I could just dry, I don't know. And nothing that's going to change the world. And then I just started reaching for anything I could think of to help understand my students and help me understand why their moods were fluctuating so much. I grabbed anything I could think of, and the more statistics I ran, the more I began to realize that it wasn't the correlations in the data that really mattered. It was the students putting the data into the machine that really mattered. See, I had a young person who put 0 for several weeks and then stopped showing up to my class. And when he came back to school, I pulled him aside and said, hey, we missed you. Where have you been? And he went on to tell me how he had tried to take his own life. And he was out getting counseling for a couple weeks, trying to get help and put things right. And my heart just sank. I was sick to my stomach. I had seen his zeros on the screen, and I didn't do anything about it because I didn't know what to do. And I didn't sleep that night. And the next day, when he came into class, I brought him up to my computer, and I said, if I see your mood go down to 0 again, would it be all right if I just checked in with you, see how you're doing? And he seemed like that was a pretty good idea. And I didn't know it, but that day transformed that young man's life. And I wouldn't know it till the end of the year, but he never put a mood number below 80 again. He became one of the most energetic science students I had all year. And at the end of the year, he told me something that forever changed my life. He said, Mr. Beals, it's nice to know that someone cares. And he's not the only student that's told me that since I turned this thing on. I could tell you the story of the young person whose graph was slowly going down over time. And when I approached them and asked them what was going on, they explained to me that an eating disorder was basically eating them alive and they couldn't get it under control. Or the student who pulled me aside one day to explain why their mood number was so low. They wanted to reassure me that it wasn't my class that was causing it, but it was some really horrific things that were going on outside of class. You see, there's a million things, it seems, that can affect our mood. Happiness, anger, hunger, tiredness, or maybe you suck at football and it's game day, and game day can ruin your whole day. So I think it's important for all of us to remember that each of us does have a number, and that number lives inside of us. And I've found that that number can and it does change throughout the day. So if you want to change people's lives, start by changing people's numbers. And what can you do to change people's numbers? Well, I've found that a little bit of compassion and a little bit of kindness goes a long way. But some people struggle with those two things. I've found something I think that all of us are capable of. Start with something simple, like a compliment. And if this real data from one of my students doesn't show you the power of a compliment, I don't know what would. So as we part ways today, remember that it does no good to say, hi, how are you today? Odds are the other person's just going to lie to you. Instead, try something like, hi, what's your number today? But if you do, be prepared for the consequences, because their number might just change your life. Thank you.
All righty, I'm going to get our regular screen back up here. Take me just a second. Oops. There we go. This is the first time trying to do this, so bear with me. Let's see. Share this. Okay. All right, slideshow there. Aha, I did it. Slideshow. Ah, all right, Joe, do we have our screen back up?
We do, Steve. Great job.
Okay. What a fantastic clip. You know, it comes down to simply caring, a little compassion, a little empathy can go a long way in working with students that are in your classroom. In fact, when I was working with the Quality Institute, I had the privilege of traveling the state with Mickey Corso, Dr. Corso, and doing demonstration focus groups. And what you do when you do a focus group is you actually look for patterns. You're looking for things that keep coming up over and over. And once you get those patterns, then you can pretty well identify what the students are thinking as a whole. Now, we went to big schools, AA schools in the East and the West, small schools, East, West. And, you know, when we talked to the kids about their efforts in school, one thing kept coming up. I heard it 7 times in different high schools, not even related to one another. And that is, if I know the teacher cares about me, I will go out of my way to do well in their class because I don't want to disappoint them. But if to them I'm a butt in a seat or a grade in the grade book, then I'll generally do what I have to do to get by, but I'm not going to give them my best effort. To a further range where we had kids that said, I don't care, I'll throw the class. I'm not going to give them the pleasure of knowing that I'm doing what they're doing if I don't think they care about me. So not only does it show up all over the world, but it shows up in Montana. The kids want a personal relationship. They want an adult that will care about them. And it's something you can employ without spending a penny. And we all wonder, you know, this is experience, but does the research support it? Well, there's a study done at the University of Edinburgh that basically said the more teachers care about students, the more respect they'll receive from them. Dr. Gail McLeod said, she was on this study, that young people do what adults ask them when they have a sense that adults care about them. She further went on to say, it isn't about young people doing what they're told because they want the adult to like them. They do what they're told because they feel the adult already does like them. And this brings us to an important concept that Mickey Corso used to share, and that's the explicit versus the implicit curriculum. The explicit curriculum is basically what is taught. That's what's in the curriculum document. That's the lessons and how they're put together and presented. The implicit curriculum, known as the hidden curriculum, is the instructional attitudes that the teacher has, and learning environment that surrounds the learner, or simply how it is taught. Implicit, what is taught; implicit, how it is taught. I guarantee you, students will forget what is taught, but they will remember how it's taught. They will forget what you teach them. They will remember how you treat them. Now, this is the the MTSS triangle. Sheila, this may be a little old, but it still serves the purpose. On the left side, you can see the academic support. And on the right side, you'll notice behavioral, social, emotional supports, MBI and PBIS. PBIS, of course, is what you received last month with Tim Lewis, and he is just fantastic. And of course, I'm talking about the HESA, Quality Institute for Student Aspirations Information. And I think the key to this is right here in the center. And that is a fluid design to move students from tier 1 to tier 2, tier 2 to tier 3, or 3 to 2, or 2 to 1, or for that matter, 1 to 3, 3 to 1. A fluid design. And you know, you can't have a fluid design that's successful unless you have strong relationships with the kids, because it's the relationships that make the student have trust in what you're doing. I had the pleasure of working for Ryan Schrenk and Burge and Joe, with Joe at Ed Ready, and there's some really good examples of what Ed Ready can do to help with that fluid design as long as the students trust. As an example, a lot of our kids end up moving from 1 to 2 if they have to take a credit recovery class, where they have to take the class over. Now, what Ed Ready does with this, because it's connected to the digital academy, is if the kids don't have the skills necessary to take the class, we can put them in Ed Ready and build those skills before they even take the class. We move down to the younger grades and look in a different direction. We have a lot of students that are quite advanced. And so you can have a tier 1 to tier 2 system set up with a student who needs more challenge. So you can actually put them into tier 2 using Ed Ready as an example, because they can then advance their skills and grow in their math at a faster rate than the other students. And this gives them that opportunity. So yes, I think relationships fit very well as being an absolute necessity to make sure that the tiered system and the movement from levels actually really works. Now, I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about Qualia student aspirations, the 3 guiding principles, and the 8 conditions that affect student aspirations, and share with you some of the state data we had from about 2016. If you have questions, once again, you're welcome to send them by chat, and Joe or Keith can pick those up and answer them or refer them to me. We're going to talk about the 3 guiding principles: self-worth, active engagement, and sense of purpose. So let's talk about self-worth first. These are what a student needs to be able to aspire and develop aspirations. They need to belong. And I don't mean in the gang sense where everybody has to conform to expectations and they're there. I'm talking about in the fact that they can be themselves and still fit in. There's room enough for everybody. Heroes. I'm not talking about athletes. I'm not talking about movie stars. I'm not talking about rock stars. What we are talking about is people in the everyday life of these students, people who can support them when it is going well, but maybe more importantly, they can actually celebrate with them when things go well. And a sense of accomplishment. It's interesting. The sense of accomplishments is pretty clear. They got to feel like they're making forward progress in the right direction. One thing that I picked up in my years working with Qualia and others, and I really believe this because I've experienced it, is that kids respond more positively and with more enthusiasm when you comment on their effort and not on their product. And it doesn't matter if it's the A student or the D student, it's the effort that they respond to and not as much the product that they produce. Interesting, when we look at statewide data from 16, this is what came out of, Montana had, 30 or 40,000 surveys that year. 35% of the students say that students respect each other, 1 in 3. 2 and 3 feel accepted in school. Only 2 and 5 feel they're a valuable member of the school community. And that bottom one, the principal knows my name. That one's pretty good, 80%, 83%. And I used to spend a lot of time learning the names of kids. And I always ask myself, why do I do this? I handed out a lot of milk in the first 2 weeks of school just to learn the names of the kids within my domain. Well, I had a little girl who moved into the school. It was the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade at the time. And she moved in at the start of 4th grade. And she'd been in her for 4 years, kindergarten. And she said, you know, Mr. You are absolutely the best principal I've ever had. And I thought, wow, that's really cool, man. But then I thought, well, she only had two. So, she's only had two. So, you know, I'm going to celebrate it anyway. So I asked her, I said, hey, you know, what makes me the best principal? And she said, well, I was here for 3 weeks in the fall and you knew my name. My last school, I was there for 4 years, and I don't think the principal ever did know my name. It's that personal connection. It sets value in the students, and in turn, they give it back to you. We move. I left these in, folks. These are questions for discussion. I want them to be in the PowerPoint, so you have a desire to look at some of these later. We're not going to spend any time on this now. So the principle 2 is active engagement. Fun and excitement. And I'm not talking about clowning and, you know, let's watch a movie today and laugh. What I'm talking about is lessons that engage you to the point that you forget what time it is. I used to have a college class that turned me into a learner. It was Montana history. It was K. Ross Toole. Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. It was Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 3. There were about 200 kids in the class, and every session every lecture he gave had 500 people at it. On a Friday afternoon in college, you're usually downtown traipsing through the bars. But nobody missed this class because it was exciting. It was fun. It was interesting. Curiosity and creativity. You know, I think we do a pretty good job of squelching those in most cases. We've got to work harder to allow kids to be curious and encourage them to be creative. Spirit of adventure. This is that risk-taking. There are so many students that won't take a risk because they don't want to fail, when indeed we should be encouraging them to take the risk and experience the failure. What was it? Edison invented 999 light bulbs before he finally found one that worked. That's the lesson we need. That failure is part of the growing process. So go after it. Have a spirit of adventure. Well, in this area, school is boring. 43%. That's interesting. Of course, this day and age is pretty hard because they are so media driven that it's hard to it's hard to match that in the school. So my classes help me understand everyday life. Students are supportive of one another. I only raise my hand if I am sure of the answer. And the other one that came up quite often was, when I raised my hand, the teacher never calls on me. So in the school I was in, we decided as a staff that we were going to eliminate raising hands. So what we did is we had a tile jar with each kid's name on it. When a question was asked, the teacher would draw a tile, and it would be for that student to answer the question. They could pass it or they could answer it, and the others could pitch in to help out. But once the tiles were all gone, then they put them back in again. So the students could never say, you never called on me. It spreads it out so that it doesn't look like the teacher is leaning toward favorites. And the last principle, principle 3, leadership and responsibility, is under sense of purpose. And interestingly, with the leadership and responsibility, one of the things that I think is really important here is that leadership needs to start with yourself. In other words, you need to be responsible for what you do, and in a sense, you're providing leadership for yourself. It's only then that you can be an effective leader for others. Confidence to take action is kind of what we're shooting for. What we want our kids to do is we want them to leave that 12th grade and take that next step into life with the confidence that they can do it, and they can do it well. And of course, what you'll find if you have solid relationships with students is that you'll look back and they'll look back and they'll find you somewhere and they'll say, man, thank you for believing in me. I still have that happen where kids say, oh, you were the best principal, you know, that feels good. It makes me feel like, yeah, your focus was in the right direction. So here's the state data. Other students see me as a leader. Only 32%, 59% see themselves as a leader. Other students listen to my ideas, 1 in 4. I supervised an outstanding teacher back in my career as a principal who ran an unbelievable collaborative learning model. And one of the things is the kids were taught to listen to each other and to hear the ideas in the class. So I know his class would have scored higher on this had they been surveyed. Students have a voice in decision making at school. About half the kids feel that's true. Teachers believe in me and expect me to be successful. I like that. 3 out of 4 kids think teachers do believe in them and expect them to be successful. So let's look at the data from a point of view of, can we make a difference? These bar graphs show 6 Montana schools that started surveying in 2010 and 11 and continued to 12 and 13. They were schools that played the game exactly as the game was meant to be played. They surveyed, they held focus groups, random focus groups, making sure they got a variety of kids in. They took the information, they found trends, and then they addressed those specific needs and tried to improve them. Well, here are 3 questions asked, and the lower bar is 2010 in those 6 schools. School inspires me to learn. Well, in 2010, it was 59%. In those same schools, it was 71% in 2012-13. It's the same with decision-making in the school and teachers respect students. So these schools are schools that utilize the voice program by listening to kids and then responding to what they heard. Now, this is interesting. And maybe Joe could do this because he's a math teacher, but the Quality Institute has some statisticians there that were able to do a statistical odds analysis on the question of teachers respect students and voice and decision making. And this is what they came up with. In those 6 schools, between 2010 and 2012, that students who feel they have a voice in decision making in their schools are more likely to feel that teachers respect students. And in this case, in those 6 schools, 300 more students would feel teachers respect students in 2012 than in 2010. That's a lot of students and a pretty impressive growth. Oh, and Keith, here we are. This is one of my favorite slides. Keith is he's a fabulous educator, and this shows it. He worked very hard in his school to look at student voice data, pick certain areas to work on, including teachers enjoy working with students. There's a lot of good stories behind how that came to be, but you can see his growth in 2010 and 11. That was 57%. By 2015 and 16, it has gradually grew, but was at 84%. That's a difference. That's a huge difference. That many more kids were engaged in the process of school. And as Keith would say, positive, negative are directions. Which direction do you choose? There's another one that you can utilize with your school boards when they want to cut activities. Students are asked on surveys whether or not they participate in co-curricular activities. This would include career and technical student organizations, like FFA or DECA or FCLA. It would include drama, theater programs, speech and debate. It would include music and music competition, and it would include athletics. So what we were able to do was, in one of the years, was to sort out students who said they didn't participate in an activity versus the students who did participate. And this graph shows the purple being the students who were in the activities. Those students have a far more positive view of their school experience than students who don't participate. It's a good reason to fight for the extra programs. One thing I know that my wife did when she was working with Capital High was they really worked hard on getting the freshmen in and talking to them one by one about what activities were available and encouraged them to get involved. Quite successful. Now, teachers always say, well, wait a minute here. You're listening to the kids. What about the staff? You know, nobody ever listens to us. And you're right. You're right. Actually, there is a teacher voice survey, and I have done focus groups for teachers to talk about their situation and actually come to find trends and then recommend back to schools what they should do. But I like it how we actually compare the data in the surveys. There's three types of comparisons to make. The first one is they both answer the same question. I'm proud of my school. I'm proud of my school. The second one is they're looking at the same thing, but from different directions, like I respect students, teachers respect students. So that's looking at the same thing from the teacher's view and the student's view. And the last one is that they're looking at the same thing, but from their location. Students respect each other, staff respect each other. And the data is interesting. So this is the same thing, same direction. Students, I'm proud of my school. 60% statewide said they're proud of their school. Teachers, 87%. And I don't know why that is, but I think Dr. Qualley once said, well, maybe it's because the teachers have the say of what goes on in this school. So naturally, then they would be proud of what they're doing. This one is interesting. Off the point of view, is 100% of teachers say they respect students, and I believe that they do. Students don't quite see it that way. About 63% feel that teachers respect students. So there's a gap there. That's something that could be worked on. And this is one of my favorites, similar thing from their location. I see myself as a leader, 59% of the students. Other students see me as a leader, 32%. It's a 27-point difference. But look at the teachers. 80% see themselves as a leader. 59% think others see them as a leader. The gap is about the same. It starts in school and works right up into your adult experiences. I want to say that engagement, and Dr. Qualia will say that we don't have an achievement gap, we have an engagement gap. And I think he's right. Kids appreciate teachers with expertise in the content. They like it when teachers know what they're talking about, and more importantly, they're excited to share it. Students cannot get away with having it all fall to the teacher, though. Students have to work to build their interest in the content as well for engagement to happen. But that most important thing is right up here, and that's the teacher-student relationship. And I'll stand by that. I believe it's right. I think it's the basis for everything that we do in education. I think it's the thing that's been hit hardest with COVID. We can still do the rigor, we can still provide some relevance, but it's really hard to develop relationships when you're not meeting face-to-face and having that opportunity. So I'm going to give you some thoughts about what you can do to enhance your relationship with students. These don't cost a thing. So you're inspiring aspirations. So carrying ideas, you listen to their concerns, you look for patterns in what they share, and you show value in the input by taking action on what you hear. If you're going to listen to their concerns, then you can't just listen and walk away. You've got to be able to show them that something came from what they had to tell you. Establish leadership roles for students. I think they need to have that practice. And this one's the easiest of all, and sometimes we don't think about it. I think about a student in Belt, the teacher in Belt, that when we're doing a focus group there, the kids are saying that this teacher he didn't connect, he just didn't fit, he didn't seem connected at all. And his first year of teaching, he come to the divisional basketball tournament, which was in Hamilton. He drove in a snowstorm Saturday morning to go to Hamilton to watch the team play. The kids saw that, and it changed the whole relationship with that teacher in the school. So attend their plays, go to their concert games, make sure they know that you were there. You know, I attended your concert last night. You did a great job. Know their personal interests and goals, ask them about them. You know, you're walking down the hall and say, hey, did you snowboard this weekend? Because you know he snowboards. Talk about it. Contact parents with positive only messages. Parents love to hear that. I used to do that in my elementary school. I'd send out postcards with something that had been seen in their child, something good. And I had people run across grocery stores to catch me and say, thank you for that note. They really like to know that when you get the call, it's not always going to be negative. Empathize with students in difficult times, but more importantly, celebrate successes. Praise their efforts over the product. And last of all, genuinely care about them. You're glad they're in your class and you miss them when they're gone. We tried to do that. Our school administrators, assistants, would always tell the kids when they came back that we missed them and we're glad you're back, just so they'd have that sense of belonging. So building strong personal relationships allows you to demand rigor and demonstrate relevance. Inspiring students to be aspirational. That's what it's all about. So thank you. If we have questions, or Joe, Keith, if you want to add anything, feel free to do so.
I do, Steve. Couple things. One, so great for you to review the importance of student voice. And like I said earlier when I introduced you, you're the one that fired me up about getting involved in that. I was one of those teachers at first when I looked at student data. I went, yeah, but that's student perception. And I got past that because their perception, it's their reality. And I remember looking at some data from our school and I went, no way, I was bummed. But you learn to get by that, and that importance of having the follow-up focus groups, it's imperative. You know, and I think that you would, along with Russ Qualia, would say, hey, if you're going to give these surveys, but you don't end up doing anything with them, like having focus groups and showing the students that it's valuable, don't even give them.
Exactly.
That probably does more harm than good.
Yep, that's exactly right. Exactly right. You know, interesting, I'm going to add one little story on that. This was a school in the Midwest where the students were not proud of the school. So the school jumped the focus group and went right to what they thought was the answer. So they held pep assemblies and they did more assemblies in general and got the kids together more, and it didn't change. So they finally asked, how come this didn't change? And the kids said, do you know what we mean when we're not proud of our school? And they said, well, obviously not. The kid said, look at the tiles and ceiling. They're all broken. The lockers are broken. The planter out front of the building has been a weed patch and not planted in 5 years. This place is a dump. So they assumed what the kids were thinking without taking the time to talk to them and find out what they were thinking. So anyway, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to stop my share, start the video. So there we are. Anybody else? Any other thoughts?
I want to give Mr. Hoyer a chance to talk, but I have 3 concluding remarks when But Keith, I want you to jump in here for a second.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve. That was really nice. It is nice, when you can make that correlation with the student voice and building those relationships, and how we put that into our MTSS framework, because there's a ton of studies right now in special education where using the student voice, using building relationships, and then applying that with a MTSS framework, and the improvement it's had in students with IEPs is nuts. There's a whole bunch of work that through the Quality Institute, and then also if you just Google it online, that you'll find what a huge difference that makes. So that voice pattern with the structure of the framework with MTSS shows huge improvement. So I would encourage people to look at that. I also, real quick, I did post a link to the YouTube of, and we'll post the link to everybody on Steve's speech today, but I posted Tim Lewis's YouTube link in the chat box. So if anybody wants to copy that, and once again, if you just email me, I can send you all the links and the PowerPoints and everything else for all of our community of practice events. So thank you very much, Steve.
And feel free to contact me. I'm sure my wife would love it for me to have more to do. Actually, I'm very busy, but this is the single most important aspect of what I found in education. This is the heart of what my beliefs are. And so I feel passionate about it. So I'm willing to help you in any way that I can.
And here's my takeaway, Steve, that I just want to share with you and share with the rest of the people who are still on the webinar. I've been doing some work with schools on the growth mindset, Carol Dweck's work, and we talk about praise and what that praise looks like, and praising effort versus ability, huge. But you also put in there today, praise the effort versus their product, the final product. I thought that was another nice twist on that. The second thing that was profound to me today was how you talked about movement on the triangle from the different tiers, from tier 1 to tier 2, or tier 2 to tier 3, or back the other direction, whatever that looks like. And maybe you're using a tiered system of support like EdReady, which is a phenomenal program. You and I both know that. And I think Dr. Schrank's on here, Verge is on here, incredible. But I like the way you pointed out what's the fuel for the movement, and it's relationships. Yeah, that is excellent. And then lastly, I want to tell you, I think I was at about an 88. That was my number today. It's been a good day. And I just want you to know that your presentation took me to 100.
Yeah. Craig's work was, what an insightful lesson that he learned that we can all learn from. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks everybody. I had fun doing this.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was very inspiring. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today. There were a lot of people that were excited to see you. So enjoy retirement.
My long hair, huh? Because I can.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Joe and Keith. This was fabulous.
Absolutely. Sheila, thanks everyone for attending. Steve,
thank you.
I'll be in touch.